Thank you very much. So thank you, everybody, and good morning. This morning, I've been given the onerous task to discuss strengthening agricultural and market value chains. Just before I came, somebody asked me a question. And the question was, what are the international investments opportunities for agriculture in the Niger Delta region? And I said, some things, anything, everything, or nothing. By the time I go through this presentation, you will understand why my answer is like that. Now, agricultural value chains basically reflects 5 C's: coordination, cooperation, competition, conformity, and compliance. The last 2 is where we often miss it, and that is where our challenge in the Niger Delta is. We have to coordinate the stakeholders in the value chain, right from the pre-production to the post-production, including the markets. Therefore, we have to take care of everything. We have to take care of organizing everybody to behave as one for one specific purpose. Nowadays, there are a lot of things, a lot of people talk about value chain. The other day, I was listening to somebody talking about value chain in tourism. So these days, everything is analyzed in terms of value chains. But agricultural value chain has been there for quite a while. Actually, I've spent all my life doing that in the last 25 years. And I want us to understand that in a simple value chain, agricultural value chain, it is built to empower farmers to think business. It doesn't have to do with smallholder production. It doesn't have to do with producing for my household. It has to do with producing for the market. To produce for the market, it means that the information you have, the information that enables you to produce has to come from the market first. If there is no market, there is no value chain. So basically, you have to look at the inputs, which encompasses those involved in the steps leading to harvests, which includes agro-dealers who sell to farmers, farmers who also produce the commodities that we sell. I didn't say that we eat. That comes later. There's also an aspect of the output side of it which actually deals with steps that agricultural products take from its point of production to the consumer. Now, next steps. If you look at the agricultural chains as we have it in Nigeria today, there are several models. And there are practical models that we find. Some of us in this room are part of it. The primary one is the producer-driven model, which actually involves farmers coming into groups, cooperatives, to produce for market power. Basically, to access new markets, obtain higher market prices, stabilize and secure market positions. It could also involve large-scale farmers. This has been there even before some of us came into the scene. Today, you will notice in Nigeria a buyer-driven approach. This involves processors, traders, exporters, retailers trying to organize farmers to produce for them, because they have been able to identify specific markets, and therefore they have to assure supply of production. This, incidentally, happens to be still the major challenge in our agricultural production systems. These people try to increase supply volumes and also maintain consistent supply of commodities for them as entrepreneurs on the other side of the chain to be able to market their commodities. We also have facilitator-driven value chains, which, for example, you have markets program, AFAD is in value chain, GEMS is in value chains. These are all called facilitator-driven value chains, driven by NGOs to be able to make markets work for the poor. That is a common terminology I know that people in PIND know about. We also have the rationale here as being regional and local development, especially within a specific region, like the Niger Delta. Then we have lead firms. Some years ago, Lever Brothers was here trying to build value chains, market chains, even for commodities, even as small as salt. Or you can say it is small, but it is not small. Like I said, the principal thing we do with respect to improving value chains is to improve coordination and cooperation in order to gain efficiency within the system. So all the stakeholders are organized in such a way that they meet a specific target for what they are producing. But it requires a lot of technology within the system. It requires a lot of energy. It requires a lot of business sense to be able to organize producers to produce for the markets that they are targeting. Because we have so many small farmers, especially even in the Niger Delta, one of the best ways we have found to be able to organize the farmers is to put them into cooperatives or groups. This is very challenging because a lot of people do not believe that they should work together. I worked in the Niger Delta for 4 years on what we call the Cassava Enterprise Development Project. One of the most challenging areas to work in terms of this aspect of cooperation and coordination is working with small farmers in the Niger Delta. Next, please. The second issue with respect to organizing small farmers is to improve their efficiency. I used to tell people that the secret of the agri-business investment is not in the machines that you put out there for processing. It is actually in the farm. What does that mean? If you're not able to drop your cost of production on the farm, your processing will absorb that and you, of course, bring it up to the consumer at a very high cost. One of the principal ways, I'm giving an example from cassava and it applies to many commodities. This was an experiment. This was something we did many years ago. We found out that you can actually drop cost of production for cassava to less than $20 per ton. Unfortunately, anytime I say this, a lot of people get surprised. I was in Dakar a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking to somebody, a farmer in Nigeria here, and he told me that he's getting less than 20 tons per ton. In his own production, he has a 300-hectare farm, so I know this is possible. Next, please. The next necessity, I will call it, in respect to developing value chains, is finance. Money is never enough. But the critical issue here is that if you are able to organize your value chains and you don't also provide some financial capacity within it, it is not possible that you can go far. Therefore, one of the ways we try to do financing within agricultural value chains is not to target only farmers or small farmers. You have to target everybody in the value chain, the retailers, the wholesalers, the processors, the input dealers, and so on. Basically, to be able to improve their competitiveness in the market. Now, again, this is a challenge because it is not almost always possible for you to identify every single person in the value chain who is effective enough to support each other for some commodities. Next, please. However, we also find that processors, off-takers, in this case, are able to organize financing for their farmers. Somehow, sometimes it works spontaneously. Somehow, sometimes it is done with some caution. What we find, and you find a lot of enterprises in Nigeria doing this, they bring in machinery for processing. They need raw material. They begin to build their farmer groups into associations, provide them with farm inputs, tractors. 10 years ago, when I used to say this to people, that if you want to do investment in Nigeria at this point in time, you don't just bring the machines and expect the farmers to bring the cassava to you because there's cassava everywhere. That cassava is not for you. That cassava is for another market. If you want to bring cassava to yourself, you have to go sit down, talk with the farmer, live with them in the village, and talk with them one-on-one. Give some more promises, do some CSR. Otherwise, no cassava will come to your factory. 3 people tried it, it didn't work. I won't name them. They brought starch factories into Nigeria, 250 tons, 300 tons, 150 tons. They never got one single cassava. It doesn't work that way. You have to bring the factory, you have to first of all even organize the farmers, tell them your mission before you bring in the machines, and provide tractors, provide fertilizers, provide finance, provide everything. That is the difference between investing in Nigeria and investing anywhere else. It's not just for cassava, it happens for almost all commodities. But what that does is that once the farmer is guaranteed a market, the banks begin to come to the farmer. This is what is happening today. Next, please. This system, the warehouse receipt system, is an example of financing which Nigeria has not been able to get right. Today we are trying to privatize the Abuja commodity exchange. Basically because it started as a public sector enterprise. Nowadays, businesses are not run by government. And so warehouse receipt systems, which also involve some kind of funding, financing model, has not really taken off in Nigeria. But a lot has happened in Ethiopia in the recent past, especially for exportable commodities. So, innovative financing is key to growth in modern agro value chains. But we have to look at how we deal with working capital and investment capital. If you look at the system in Nigeria today, you will find that investment capital for machinery is handled by the Bank of Industry, while your working capital is handled either by the Bank of Agriculture or some other commercial banks. We have to have a dedicated banking system that focuses on agricultural production systems and marketing. If you split it into two, it becomes a bit more cumbersome. They don't understand themselves because they work in silos. They know they can bring in machines for you at zero cost, but they do not understand what you do at the other end. So we have to tweak it a little bit more to make it more efficient. We also have to look at multiple financial products. You have to target financial systems for traders, financial products for processors, financial products for service providers, financial products for logistics. They don't carry and should not carry the same interest rates. Even though we say they should be single digit, they cannot carry the same interest rates. They should also not carry the same tenor because their functions, some are very short term, some are short term, some are medium term, and some are long term. Something like land development in the Niger Delta is a huge investment. It's about 300,000 naira per hectare to clear land for agriculture, not to do the normal land preparation. I mean land development itself. Nobody takes care of that in the banking system or in the financial system. That is a long-term investment. It's a capital investment on its own, for example. We also need to strengthen the risk assessment and lending criteria. We have NISA, which is trying to do that. They're still coming up with changes and they're still on a trial and error phase. And most importantly, we have to adopt modern technological innovations to improve financing systems. Next. One of the best known in the world in terms of using ICT for financing is M-Pesa. Originally designed for microfinance banks. But basically, it has taken over the whole of Kenya. You can use it in hotels, you can use it in so many places now to pay. It was designed actually to pay for loans you took from banks. And it was almost at very low interest, almost 0.5% interest at a point, if you take a loan for agricultural production. Now, I want to draw your attention to the diagram on the other side. That diagram is actually showing the value chain for cassava fufu in the Niger Delta. Imagine how much the farmers would have saved if they can be able to identify how much volumes Onitsha needs of cassava fufu, the simplest poor man's food you can find in this part of the world. What happens is that sometimes the Onitsha market is so saturated that the market in Abo and some of the local markets throw away their cassava fufu. ICT can help to solve this kind of situation. Next, please. I actually didn't want to go into defining what is marketing and so on. What I really want to draw to your attention is the fact that if you have to market any commodity, there are 4 Ps. It's simple economics. You have to look at the issue of price, you have to look at product, you have to look at promotion, and you have to also consider where you're sitting and where you are taking your commodity to. These are 4 critical issues, but I will expand it a little bit more. Product. If you don't brand in these days, modern years, 2015, 21st century, I'm not exactly sure you can sell anything if you don't brand it. Next, please. Market information is critical. It has become so critical because the market has become so sophisticated. Today we are talking of obesity, we're talking of eating vegetables, and some people are talking of eating meat pies. Who do you want to satisfy? You have to understand your market, and it's critical, and the only way I see possible to do this nowadays is to use the mobile phones. And it cuts across all commodities, whether it is garments or food. Our people are getting more sophisticated. Next, please. Mobile phones have been able to impact on logistics and transportation costs. People don't actually have to travel anymore to sell anything. I'll show another slide on that. That's the slide. The slide on the, sorry, go back. The diagram on the right, I was sitting in Burkina Faso, Ouagadougou one afternoon. I was in a conference like this, and a truck passed. And I looked at the truck, and it had a Lagos number. And I said, how can this truck be here in Ouagadougou? So I left the conference, took a motorbike, and followed it. I was younger then. This was 15 years ago. When I got to where the truck parked, the driver was coming down, so I asked him in Hausa, where are you coming from? He said he's coming from Kano. And I said, because the number in his vehicle was AE something something FKJ, so I knew it was Ikeja. It's a Lagos number. So I said, what are you carrying from Kano to this place? And he said, Gari and cassava flour. So I decided I would study the market for Gari and cassava flour. The so-called international market we have always claimed does not exist. And I found out that Nigeria exports significant amounts of these commodities to the Sahelian regions up to the tune of 550,000 metric tons every year. But that's not the only end of the story. I also found out that the research we do trying to improve cassava varieties for small farmers in the southern Niger Delta area and the middle belt of Nigeria is actually feeding the Sahelian regions. The major agglomeration point, aggregation point for cassava in Nigeria is the Kanu market, Dawanu market to be precise. They have 4,000 warehouses for Gari alone. I mean, it's a very interesting study. I saw later that USAID continued on these studies and they actually found out that, I'm going to discuss that later, we don't have issues of conformity, we don't have issues of safety, SPS, and so on. But the point I want to make is if you were using, the point I wanted to make here was that farmers in Dawanu market actually use mobile phones to contact the traders in southern Nigeria to supply them commodities which they stock and then watch the market in the Sahelian regions and move it across, especially in those years when there are drought. Next, please. Now, we have come to a new phase, a reality check actually in Nigeria. The prices of oil have gone down. So now, we have to mean business. We have 4 options: agriculture, solid minerals, industry, manufacturing, and environment. A lot of people don't understand how environment becomes business. It's big business. Agriculture, we have done some studies and we found out that for you to do large-scale agricultural production, when I mean large-scale, I'm not talking about large farms and large factories. I'm talking about clustering, industrial clusters, where you accommodate the person who produces mushrooms, as well as the person who produces cassava starch, as well as the person who produces flour, agro-industrial clusters. The challenge to that, just click, primarily is infrastructure, especially energy. Second is finance, as I've already explained. Third is how do you secure your supplies? There is an issue with respect to how do you get volumes to be able to feed your factories. I've talked about that. It's a matter of coordination and cooperation. Fourth on the list is policy and regulatory bodies. Policy, there's always a policy somersault. I think we will discuss that further. And where are the regulatory bodies? Some of them, as you will see, do not exist. But there's also an issue with skills. When I was in the university, I used to train students on how to couple tractors and plow. Nowadays, they don't even know how to do it at all. The vocational and technical skills required in the agricultural system is almost vanishing. It is the same for every other vocation. So these are some of the issues that are challenging current agribusiness, and if we have to expand, upscale, these are some of the issues we have to deal with. Especially when we are talking about agro-industrial clusters. For us to be able to stimulate private sector investments to drive a market-led agricultural transformation, this is what we need. We don't need small things. We don't need micro things. We need to shift agriculture from government-controlled to private sector-led. We need to transform the agricultural financial landscape. We need to channel investments in infrastructure and services. I keep wondering how our forefathers built beautiful universities. We can no longer replicate them. We need to strengthen the policy and investment climate. In actual fact, we need to domesticate at the state level the policy and investment climate. Next. I was part of the team that designed the staple crop processing zones for Nigeria. Basically, it's an agro-industrial cluster. The concept is you have 250 hectares of industrial land seated in the center of an area which we call the agri-business investment region, constituting about 30 to 50 kilometer square area, where any size of farmer can produce anything in the world. That is the concept. That design is so inclusive, but we have challenges in respect of implementation. Next, please. That's the business plan, inclusive in the sense that whether you're a 1 hectare farmer, or whether you're a half a hectare processor, or whether you're a 30,000 hectare farmer, you can fit into that system. The general idea is to improve competitiveness. We keep talking about the fact that we have a comparative advantage in almost everything. But the key is competitiveness. Next. We are looking at a situation where the agricultural or agribusiness climate or sector in Nigeria is structured in this format. We have already done 7 master plans, beginning from a fish landing site and processing site in Rivers State all the way to Kano, which today is currently being taken up by some anchor investors like Dangote and Cargill. There is a lot of investment going on now. Next. What this has done is to bring in a new kid in the block, an additional player in the agricultural value chain, the estate or infrastructure developer. My initial discussions did not involve this kind of person. Now, if you have an investor of this nature who has to build the industrial estate, his financial needs will be different. Will be different from that of the agro-processor, from the farmer cooperatives, the service provider, the government, and even development partners who are seriously also engaged in this investment, including USAID, the World Bank, and several others. We have to also, because he's getting involved, now modify our land titling system. You will not believe it. When we wanted to take possession of the Kogi site, the federal government had to come down to the state government to ask it to sign for the 250 hectares and give it to the federal government to hold until someone like the estate person comes in, and then they sign it off to him and give him give him the lease as part of the agreement. Basically, the land of the country belongs to the state, not to the federal government. And therefore, if we have to ease land allocation for investments, we have to find a new method of doing it. The other issue we have is starting a business. Yesterday, the first call I had in the morning, I will not mention where it came from. Some high officer in the ministry, in the federal government, called me and said, do you know we don't have any kind of documentation on how to start a business in Nigeria? I said, I think it is within your ministry to design one. How do you start a business in Nigeria? Our ease of doing business indicators are very poor. We are not very competitive. For us to build our agro-industrial sector to any meaningful level, we have to deal with these issues. Getting electricity, dealing with construction permits, registering property, which I just mentioned, getting credit, protecting investor security, paying taxes, trading across borders. I'll discuss this in a little more detail. Enforcing contracts and resolving insolvency. What are the laws guiding all of this in this country? And how do we know about them? Where can you download them? Where can you get the information? Who do you talk to? Critical. Now, in May this year, some of the commodities we have, some guy exported beans to Europe and they threw it into the sea. Why? It was contaminated. Some guy exported melon and they threw it into the sea. Why? Aflatoxin. There are about 13 to 22 Nigerian commodities or products that have been found not to be exportable. Why? We don't have a national quality infrastructure program. We don't have at all. If you want to export anything from Nigeria today, where do you get your certificate of origin? Sorry? FAO? You pick it from the streets. Somebody signs it for you. So, yes, the Nigerian Chamber of Commerce is supposed to do that. They do that, sometimes not effectively. The point I'm trying to make here is that we don't have a national quality infrastructure program. Therefore, we have a problem of marketing our commodities out. We have a problem of capacity to conform to international standards. We have a problem of lack of information on trade rules. Fortunately, UNIDO is building that program today. We have two programs, one specifically for Nigeria and one for the West Africa sub-region. And in doing so, what we are trying to do is to build up Nigeria's competitive advantage to conform to international standards of trade and connect effectively to the market, basically building trust for trade. And in doing so, we have been able to link up with all the international organizations that are supposed to be partners in this. And currently, we are building a national system in Nigeria and another system for the whole of West Africa. Next, please. What does that imply? It implies that we have to set up a metrology institute, which has been commissioned in Enugu, a testing and conformity assessment laboratories. These actually will be led by the private sector. If those commodities were tested before they were exported, they would have known that there was aflatoxin or mycotoxin in them. The point is, the laboratories are not accredited, so they can't do it. We need to build up an accreditation system, one accreditation body for the country, which we have registered as NINAS. Of course, we have Standards Organization, which is a major body that is driving this at the moment, but eventually may be also separated. And we need to have certification bodies. If the body of quantity surveyors in Nigeria says this material is certified, then it is certified. We're working with so many, I didn't know we have so many organizations in this country that are supposed to be doing certification, but they are not doing it. Next, please. So we are providing assistance on national quality policy. We finished with the policy. We're establishing a national accreditation body. Actually, we just registered it. A National Metrology Institute. And we're working with the private sector to improve their capacity to conform to assessments. And then extend the use of national quality infrastructure services through awareness activities and better. We're working with Consumer Protection Council on this. The point I'm making here is, if you don't have a national quality body, you can neither conform nor comply with international trade. And this has become critical today also in our own agricultural value chain. Every year or every 6 months, you find that sanitary and phytosanitary standards change. You may bring in a commodity, like you can take this bottle of water to Netherlands today. You come back in 6 months, it's changed. We don't have that kind of information flow for people who are exporting commodities. Which therefore we are going to introduce the ISO 22000. We have actually done a food safety policy, and we are trying to work out with the Ministry of Health several other things on this. We have to create a competent authority with the enforcement power to monitor products and players. We have to develop traceability. When it comes to export, everything you export can always be traced back to the specific manufacturer. There is always a barcode. We need to establish or upgrade microbiological and chemical laboratories. I just mentioned that. Set up services for Codex Alimentarius. We're working with FAO on this. We need to set up national and regional technical support centers. Hold on. One thing I did not add in my slide is the issue of logistics. I was in Milan last month and I met two young people. One is 25, one is 27. They are farmers. We were at the expo, and then they flunked out their cards and gave me their cards. And on their cards they wrote, farmer. And I said, you mean you are a farmer? And the guy from Botswana said, in Botswana, only farmers drive SUVs. And I said, what are you doing at the expo? The lady said, I export beans. Lentil green beans, that's what she exports. And I said, you're landlocked, so how do you get it out of Botswana? We fly it by plane. I said, how? He said, actually the work is in the packaging. If you grow the beans, you clean it out, you package it to a specific size, and it flies out after packaging same day to Europe. We don't have those kind of logistics. Fortunately, not too long ago, I saw a retired pilot here in Anambra State who is doing it the crude way. He flies vegetables to Atlanta. Now, the point I'm trying to bring out here is logistics. We have cargo airports, but no cargo. It is time to begin to move the cargoes out. Once you are able to identify your market and the logistics and how to deal with it, it is possible to produce anything, provided you conform and comply with the international standards of trade. Therefore, in conclusion, I repeat that the agricultural value chain requires coordination, cooperation, competition, and the two most important ones which we don't have yet, conformity and compliance. Thank you very much.